The hull of the United Systems destroyer Dauntless did not groan under the assault. It shrieked. It was the sound of molecularly reinforced titanium being peeled back like wet cardboard. A high-pitched scream that vibrated through the deck plates and up into the soles of Captain Ryan Hale's combat boots. Rian gripped the edges of the tactical console, his knuckles white, his eyes scanning the chaotic wash of red data scrolling across the holographic display. The bridge was a storm of sparks and shouting, lit by the strobe light flicker of emergency warnings. "Status report," Ryan barked, his voice cutting through the din of the dying ship. Lieutenant Kaito, face streaked with soot and blood, looked up from the engineering station. "Shields are down to 4%. Captain, the emitter array is slag. We have lost propulsion in sectors 1 through 5. They are not just firing at us, they are eating us." Rian looked out the main view screen. Space, usually a comforting void of stars, had been replaced by a pulsating bioluminescent nightmare. The enemy fleet did not look like ships. They looked like deep-sea leviathans grown from obsidian and starlight, their hulls rippling with organic fluidity. They moved with the synchronized grace of a school of predators, encasing the Dauntless in a net of living matter. Beams of violet energy, twisting like tendrils of DNA, lashed out from the alien vessels. They did not explode on impact. Instead, they latched onto the destroyer, dissolving the armor plating and infecting the ship's systems with a viral purple glow that spread like gangrene. "Get the crew to the escape pods," Ryan ordered, his tone flat and absolute. "Launch everything we have. All hands. Abandon ship. That is a direct order." "But Captain," Kaito protested, his hands flying over his console, "the launch bays are compromised. If we do not hold the formation—" "I said go." "Lieutenant," Ryan snapped, turning to face him. "I will hold the bridge and trigger the core overload manually. It is the only way to clear a path for the pods. Move." The crew hesitated for a fraction of a second, the loyalty in their eyes warring with the survival instinct, before training took over. They scrambled for the bulkheads. Rian watched them go, counting heads, ensuring he was the last living soul on the command deck. When the blast doors hissed shut, sealing him in the tomb of his own making, he exhaled a breath he did not know he had been holding. He turned back to the console. The alien webbing was tightening. The purple light was bleeding through the transparent steel of the viewport, casting long, sickly shadows across the bridge. Rian keyed in his command code, "Authorization Hale, Alpha 9 Zulu. Initiate core overload. Timer set for 30 seconds. He waited for the confirmation chime. It never came. Instead, the main screen flickered and turned a solid, blinding gold. A sound that was not a sound, but a psychic pressure slammed into his skull. It felt like 1,000 voices whispering in a language his brain could not comprehend, but his bones understood as a command to cease. The self-destruct countdown froze at 22 seconds. The numbers dissolved, replaced by a single pulsating glyph that looked like a burning eye. "Override!" Ryan shouted, hammering the manual lockout. "Override!" The console exploded, not in fire but in a burst of crystalline shards that drove themselves into his armor. Rian was thrown backward, crashing into the captain's chair. He tried to scramble up, reaching for his sidearm, but the air around him suddenly thickened. It turned viscous like amber. He could not breathe. He could not move. He floated upward, suspended in a golden gel that had materialized from nothing. Through the haze of the suspension field, he saw the viewport shatter. The vacuum did not rush in. Instead, the alien light rushed in, warm and terrible. The last thing Rian saw was a massive claw-like appendage from the nearest organic ship tearing through the bridge ceiling, reaching for him with gentle, terrifying precision. Consciousness returned in slow, disjointed waves. First came the sensation of weightlessness, then the smell, not the sterile recycled air of a human starship, but something rich and humid, like ozone mixed with crushed jasmine and old copper. Rian opened his eyes. He was drifting inside a translucent cocoon, a membrane that felt like warm silk against his skin. He was no longer in his uniform. He was stripped to his thermal undersuit, his weapons and comms gear gone. He pushed against the membrane, and it yielded slightly, rubbery and tough. He looked beyond his prison. He was floating down a corridor that defied every principle of human engineering. It was colossal, large enough to fly a shuttle through, with walls that curved and spiraled like the interior of a giant shell. The material was not metal or plastic, but a living fusion of gold-veined crystal and muscle-like fibers that pulsed with a rhythmic, soft light. It was beautiful, and it made his stomach turn. He was inside the beast. Two figures flanked his cocoon, drifting effortlessly through the air without jetpacks or tethers. They were tall, humanoid but distinctly alien, clad in armor that shifted color like spilled oil. One of them held a staff that emitted a low hum, seemingly guiding the stasis cocoon along an invisible magnetic rail. Ryan tested his restraints. The field holding him was absolute. He could twitch his fingers, turn his head, but his core was locked in place. He forced himself to slow his heart rate, to observe, to analyze. Panic was a luxury he could not afford. The corridor opened up into a space that stole the breath from his lungs. It was a spherical chamber, vast and hollow, seemingly carved from the heart of a geode. The walls were lined with thousands of balconies, each filled with spectators, aliens of various species, though the tall, pale-skinned Thalzen dominated the crowd. In the center of the sphere, gravity seemed to be a toy, a variable that changed on a whim. Floating platforms of obsidian and silver drifted in complex clockwork orbits. At the very center, suspended in a converging nexus of light beams, was a throne. It was a jagged shard of midnight black stone, floating unsupported, and lounging upon it, with the bored lethargy of a predator that has already eaten, was the Empress. Vailira of the Thalzen Dominion was terrifying. She was 7 feet of coiled power, her skin the color of moonlight on snow. She wore armor that seemed to be grown directly onto her body, iridescent scales that shifted from deep violet to angry crimson as she breathed. A crown of floating crystalline shards hovered just above her long silver hair, circling her head like a personal asteroid belt. Her eyes were solid pools of gold, devoid of pupils, glowing with an inner bioluminescence that brightened as Ryan's cocoon drifted closer. The court fell silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that precedes a ritual sacrifice. The guard with the staff manipulated a control on the haft. The membrane of the cocoon dissolved into mist. Rian dropped, not far, just a few inches, before an artificial gravity field caught him. He landed on his feet on a small, circular platform that had risen to meet him. He staggered but found his balance, snapping instantly into a posture of defiance, chin up, shoulders back, staring straight at the woman on the throne. Vailira shifted. The movement was fluid, liquid grace. She rested her chin on a gauntleted fist, her golden eyes boring into him. "So," she said. Her voice was melodious but carried a subsonic thrum that vibrated in Ryan's chest. "This is the commander of the primitive vessel that dared to scratch my paint." A ripple of laughter went through the court, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Rian said nothing. Name, rank, and serial number were all he was required to give. But he sensed that quoting the Geneva Convention to a woman wearing living armor would be a waste of breath. "He is small," Vailira noted, tilting her head. and he lacks natural plating. How does his species survive gravity storms, or radiation, or the simple vacuum? She waved a hand, a gesture of casual dismissal. Lower the field density in his sector. Let us see how he stands without the crutch of a stable floor. The platform beneath Ryan's feet vanished. He didn't fall down. He fell sideways. The gravity in the chamber was not uniform. It was a patchwork of conflicting fluxes. Ryan gasped as his stomach lurched into his throat. He was suddenly sliding down a slope of air, flailing for purchase on nothing. The court laughed louder this time, a cruel baying sound. Valera rose from her throne, floating effortlessly, her own personal gravity field keeping her upright and regal. She drifted toward him, circling him like a shark inspecting a drowning sailor. "Look at him flail," she mocked, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the sphere, like a hatchling pushing out of the egg. Is this the best humanity has to offer? A creature that cannot even master the simple art of orientation? Ryan gritted his teeth, his inner ear screaming in protest. He managed to tuck his knees and spin, trying to orient himself toward where down seemed to be at the moment. He spotted a floating disk of obsidian nearby, Valera's platform. He kicked out against the heavy air, aiming for the solid surface. He miscalculated. The gravity flux shifted again, a sudden surge pulling him forward with violent force. He didn't just drift toward the Empress. He was launched at her. Valera's golden eyes widened. She started to turn, perhaps to strike him down or dodge, but the physics of the moment were faster than her reflex. Ryan collided with her. It was a tangle of limbs and armor. He hit her midsection, the momentum carrying them both into a slow, tumbling spin through the zero-G center of the chamber. Ryan instinctively scrambled for a handhold, anything to stop the dizzying rotation. His fingers scraped over smooth, warm scales, searching for a grip. His hands found purchase, solid, curved purchase. He squeezed reflexively to halt his momentum. The tumbling stopped. They hovered there, suspended in the center of the court, entangled. Ryan blinked, his vision clearing. He looked at his hands. They were firmly, undeniably, clutching the armored backside of the Empress of the Thalzen Dominion. Time died. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved, no one breathed. The silence in the great chamber was absolute, a vacuum more total than space itself. Ryan looked up. Valera was frozen, her back arched, her head turned over her shoulder. Her golden eyes were wide, the pupils suddenly visible as pinpricks of shock. The bioluminescence in her cheeks flared from a soft white to a scorching sun-flare orange. She looked at his hands. Then she looked at his face. "You touched my butt, human." Her voice was not a royal decree. It was a shriek of genuine, baffled outrage that shattered the regal atmosphere instantly. The court recoiled as one mass. Ministers ducked behind their podiums. Generals reached for weapons. The air in the chamber seemed to drop 20 degrees. Ryan snatched his hands away as if he had grabbed a live power conduit. He pushed himself backward, scrambling in the air, his face burning with a heat that rivaled a supernova. I didn't, Ryan stammered, his voice cracking. I did, but it was the gravity. I was falling. He managed to right himself, hovering unsteadily a few feet away from her. He was mortified. He was a highly trained special operations captain, a veteran of a dozen campaigns, a man who had stared down plasma cannons without blinking. And now, he was going to be executed for groping an alien monarch in front of 5,000 witnesses. Valera spun around, her armor clicking softly. She was vibrating, whether it was with rage or humiliation. Ryan could not tell. She pointed a trembling finger at him. "You grabbed the Empress like a sack of grain?" "I was trying not to die," Ryan argued. panic overriding his filter. He held up his hands, palms open. Look, your gravity setup is a nightmare, one I have zero control here, Monidum. It was an accident, a tactical error. I apologize for the unauthorized contact. He did not beg. He stood as straight as he could in the shifting flux, his chin jutting out. His face was red, his dignity was in tatters, but he looked her in the eye. The court held its collective breath, waiting for the bolt of plasma that would turn the human into ash. Valera stared at him. The orange glow in her cheeks faded, replaced by a flickering, curious pulse of blue. She looked at his hands, then back at his face. She saw the terror in his eyes, yes, but she also saw the stubborn set of his jaw. He was humiliated, but he was not groveling. A strange sound bubbled up from her throat. It started as a choke and erupted into a laugh. It was a clear, ringing sound that shocked the court even more than the butt touch had. You apologize for the tactical error, she repeated, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. You stumble, you flail, you grab the royal personage by the posterior, and you call it a tactical error? She floated closer, the amusement dancing in her eyes. Minister Krell, a hunched creature with skin like dried bark and 4 weeping eyes, stepped forward on his floating podium. His voice was a rasp of dry leaves. Empress, this is an abomination. The creature has defiled your person. He must be purged. I demand his immediate execution for this insult to the throne. Valera's laughter cut off instantly. She turned to Krell, her face hardening into a mask of cold porcelain. You demand. Krell. The minister shrank back. I only meant. The law states. The law states what I say it states, Valera said, her voice dropping to a dangerous purr. And I say that killing him now would be boring. She turned back to Ryan, looking him up and down with a new expression. It was possessive, predatory. He is clumsy, she announced to the hall, her voice booming. He is rude. He has the grace of a stunned rock cow, but he is entertaining. She circled Ryan, her armored tail flicking behind her like a cat's. I have decided. He will not be executed. He will be kept. Kept? Krell sputtered. As what? A pet? As a cultural specimen, Valera declared, smiling sharply. And as my personal bodyguard. Ryan choked. Your what? You heard me, human. If you can get that close to me without my guards stopping you, perhaps you have some value. Besides, she glanced at Krell, her eyes narrowing. It seems I need someone close to me who is not afraid to make contact. The sheer insanity of the logic made Ryan's head spin. It was a power move. She was sparing him just to annoy her advisors, to show them that her whims were absolute. Take him to the guest containment, Valera ordered, waving a hand. But clean him up. He smells of fear and ozone. The court began to disperse, the murmurs of scandal buzzing like a hive of angry hornets. The guard with the staff moved to intercept Ryan, but Valera held up a hand. Wait. She floated toward Ryan again. She created a localized gravity bubble around them, a sphere of silence that dampened the noise of the departing crowd. She drifted in close, uncomfortably close. Ryan could feel the heat radiating from her armor. He could see the intricate fractal patterns in her golden irises. She smelled of electricity and something sweet, like burning sugar. She leaned forward, her lips inches from his ear. Ryan stiffened, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Do it again if you dare, she whispered. It was a taunt, a challenge. Her voice was laced with mockery, but there was an edge to it, a genuine curiosity. She was testing the limits of his audacity. Ryan swallowed hard. He pulled his head back slightly to look at her. His face was still burning, but he found his voice. I don't touch anyone without permission. Your Majesty, he said, his voice rough. And frankly, you terrify me. Valera pulled back. She studied his face, looking for the lie. She didn't find one. The mockery in her eyes softened, replaced by a flicker of something that looked dangerously like respect. Wisdom, she said softly. A rare trait in your species. She signaled the guards. Get him out of my sight. The guard's name was Keth. He was a towering insectoid with 4 arms and a carapace that gleamed like polished bronze. He did not speak much as he marched Rian through the golden arteries of the palace ship, which suited Rian just fine. He needed time to process the fact that he was alive, and that he was apparently now the royal babysitter for a woman who could crush a tank with her mind. You are lucky. Human. Keth clicked, his mandibles twitching as they reached a heavy oval door. Most who touch the Empress end up as plasma residue. I'll keep that in mind, Rian muttered. The door dissolved, literally melted away into the walls, and Keth shoved him inside. The quarters were lavish in a terrifying alien sort of way. The floor was soft, warm moss. The walls were translucent in places, offering a vertigo-inducing view of the blue-white star the palace was orbiting. Solar flares lashed out in silent, majestic arcs, filling the room with shifting light. The furniture was grown from the floor, organic curves of wood and bone. Rian waited until the door re-solidified behind Keth. Then, the soldier took over. He began a grid search of the room. He checked the corners, the ceiling, the mossy floor. His eyes scanned for the telltale shimmer of optics or sensors. He found them quickly, small spore-like nodes embedded in the walls, pulsing with a faint rhythmic light. Surveillance. Rian sat on the edge of the sleeping platform. He reached down to his boot. The Thalzen had stripped his weapons, his comms, and his tactical vest, but they hadn't checked the heel of his left boot. He pried the heel cap loose with a fingernail. Inside was a tiny, flat disc of black metal, a multi-spectrum jammer and diagnostic tool. It was standard issue for deep cover ops, designed to be missed by bioscans because it mimicked the density of the boot's sole. He pressed the disc between his thumb and forefinger to activate it. A tiny blue light blinked. He stood up and walked casually toward the blind spot of the largest spore. He hummed a tuneless melody, acting the part of the bored prisoner. As he passed the spore, he brushed his hand against the wall. The jammer emitted a localized pulse. The spore's light didn't go out, that would trigger an alarm, but its rhythm stuttered and looped. He had frozen the feed. For the next hour, whoever was watching would see Ryan Hale staring out the window, brooding, while the real Rian could move freely in the room's shadows. It wasn't freedom, but it was a start. It was a small rebellion, a way to prove to himself that he wasn't just a pet. He was still an operator. He sat back down, the adrenaline of the throne room finally fading, leaving behind a crushing exhaustion. He stared out at the burning star. He thought of his crew. Were the pods picked up? Or were they drifting in the dark, waiting for air to run out? The guilt was a heavy stone in his gut. He lay back on the strange, yielding surface of the alien bed. He closed his eyes, just for a moment. Sleep took him like a hammer, but it wasn't a normal sleep. It was a violent, lurching shift in perspective. Suddenly, he was not in the room. He was in space, but he wasn't floating in a suit. He felt immense. He felt the solar wind against his skin, but his skin was miles long and made of crystal and alloy. He felt the hunger of the fusion drive in his belly. He felt the itch of the parasite fighters docked in his hangars. He looked down, not with eyes, but with sensors that saw the entire electromagnetic spectrum. He saw the wreckage of the Dauntless drifting in the dark. He saw the debris field. He felt a cold, logical satisfaction at the destruction. Then, a flash of pain. Not physical, but data pain. A corruption in the code. A virus. Rian gasped and bolted upright in bed, his hand clutching his forehead. The room was dark, lit only by the starlight. He was sweating, his heart racing at a dangerous speed. His head pounded with a specific rhythmic throb. It wasn't a headache. It was a signal. He reached up to the base of his skull, just behind his ear. The skin felt tender, hot to the touch. He pressed his fingers against it and felt a hard lump under the flesh that hadn't been there before. Panic flared. He rushed to a reflective panel on the wall. He tilted his head, straining to see. There was a faint blue bioluminescent line tracing a vein from his neck up into his hairline. It pulsed in time with the throb in his brain. He remembered the capture, the golden gel, the whispers. They hadn't just put him in stasis. They had put something in him. The throb in his head shifted. It felt less like pain and more like a mood. A sudden sharp spike of irritation that wasn't his own. It was distant, muffled, but distinct. It felt like someone pacing in a room miles away, angry and restless. Rian touched the lump again. "Translator," he whispered to the empty room. But a simple translator didn't show you dreams of being a spaceship. And a simple translator didn't make you feel emotions that belonged to someone else. He looked out the window, toward the distant spires of the palace where the Empress's quarters likely lay. The spike of irritation came again, accompanied by a flash of image, a broken goblet, a stained rug. Rian lowered his hand, his blood running cold. They had connected him, to the ship, to the network, or to her. The High Council chamber was a monument to intimidation. It was a cavernous amphitheater carved from a single piece of dark, resonant asteroid stone, polished until it reflected the star field projected on the domed ceiling. At the center of the room, the gravity was deliberately heavy, pressing down on the shoulders of anyone unfortunate enough to stand there. Captain Rian Hale stood there. He fought the urge to shift his weight or wipe the sweat that was trickling down his spine. He wore a standard-issue Thal Zen prisoner tunic, a shimmering silken gray material that felt too thin against the chill of the room. Around him, the High Council sat on elevated tiers, their floating podiums drifting in slow, rhythmic circles like vultures catching a thermal. Empress Valera sat above them all. Her throne was not the floating obsidian shard from the public court, but a more functional tactical command chair woven from white metal and living vines. She looked bored, dangerously bored. "This creature," Minister Krell rasped, gesturing at Ryan with a withered, multi-jointed hand, "is a liability. It is a primitive biped with no carapace, no psionic ability, and a history of aggression. Why does it still breathe our air?" Valera rested her cheek against her knuckles. Her eyes, glowing a soft, steady gold, drifted from Krell to Rian. "Because, Minister," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the assembly. "The negotiations with the Cygnus Trade Alliance are approaching. The Cygnus are merchants. They value novelty. They value the exotic. What is more exotic than a human officer who survived the destruction of his own ship and the gravity of my throne room?" She gestured gracefully toward Ryan. "Captain Hale will serve as a counterpoint, a reminder that the Thal Zen Dominion collects strength from all corners of the galaxy. He is not a prisoner today. He is a texture, a living ornament to demonstrate our benevolence." Rian kept his face neutral, though his jaw tightened. Texture. He had been called a soldier, a hero, a liability, and a target. but texture was a new one. High Minister Dracul spoke up from the shadows of the second tier. He was a striking figure, tall even for a Thalzin, with skin the color of bruised plums and robes that seemed to absorb the light around him. His eyes were not gold, but a deep, unsettling violet. A bold strategy. Your Majesty, Dracul purred. His voice was like oil sliding over glass. But is it wise to bring a predator into the diplomatic creche, even a toothless one? Valera smiled. It was not a nice smile. If he bites, Dracul, I will simply pull his teeth. The council chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Rian saw Dracul smile back, but the expression did not reach his violet eyes. There was a calculation there, a cold assessment that made the hair on Ryan's arm stand up. The High Minister was not amused. He was waiting. After the session, Rian was not returned to his cell. Instead, Keth, his four-armed insectoid shadow, escorted him to the deeper levels of the palace. Orientation. Keth clicked. Empress's orders. She says if you are to be furniture, you must be educated furniture. They entered a circular room that hummed with energy. In the center stood a pillar of light that coalesced into a humanoid shape, the empathy construct. It was a shimmering, genderless hologram that shifted colors based on the emotional tone of its data. Welcome. Subject hail, the construct said. Its voice resonated inside Ryan's skull rather than his ears. I am the archive of Thalzin culture. Please state your query level. Beginner, Rian muttered. Explain why everything on this ship looks like it is going to eat me. The construct shifted to a soothing blue. The Thalzen philosophy is one of integration. We do not build, we grow. We do not conquer nature. We consume it and perfect it. The walls are alive because life is the only durable material in the universe. Metal fatigues, stone cracks, flesh adapts. As the AI droned on about the history of the Dominion, a history written in blood and genetic manipulation, Rian felt a sudden, sharp throb at the base of his skull. It was the implant, the translator node. But it was not translating words. It was translating a feeling, impatience, hot, prickly heat, a desire to crush something fragile. Ryan winced, rubbing his neck. The sensation was intense, hitting him with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't his emotion, he was bored, not angry. Is something wrong? Subject hail? The construct asked, flickering yellow. Ryan shook his head. No, just a headache. But it wasn't a headache. The sensation grew stronger, pulling him like a magnet. He turned toward the door just as it hissed open. Valera strode in. She had shed her heavy ceremonial armor for a lighter, form-fitting bodysuit of dark weave, though she still wore gauntlets that looked sharp enough to slice glass. The wave of impatience radiating from the implant spiked, then instantly vanished, replaced by a wall of cold, icy control. Ryan stared at her, wide-eyed. The implant wasn't just translating language anymore. It was picking up the leakage from her own neural broadcasts. He was feeling her mood before she even spoke. Enough history, Valera said, ignoring the construct. It is time for a practical lesson. Come, human, walk with me. She turned and left. Rian looked at Keth. The guard shrugged all four shoulders. Rian followed. The tour that followed was less of an educational trip and more of a display of dominance. Valera led him through the gravity gardens, a sector of the ship where the artificial gravity was manipulated to create impossible landscapes. Water did not flow down here. It flowed upward in spiraling helixes, nourishing trees that grew from the ceiling, their roots hanging like chandeliers. Bioluminescent fish swam through the air, suspended in globules of liquid that drifted like balloons. It is beautiful, isn't it? Valera asked, stopping by a stream of water that arched over their heads. It is, Rian admitted. He reached out to touch a passing bubble of water, but she slapped his hand away. Not hard, but fast. Do not touch, she scolded. That is acid water from the sulfur moons of Kyle. It feeds the ironbark trees. It would strip the flesh from your fingers in seconds. Rian pulled his hand back, looking at the serene, deadly water. Everything here is a trap, he noted. Even the gardening, especially the gardening, Valera said, a smirk playing on her lips. Soft things die in the Dominion, Captain. Only the dangerous survive. That is why we are strong, and that is why your Federation is weak. You coddle. We cull. We protect, Rian corrected. There is a difference. She stopped and turned to him, the lights of the garden reflecting in her armor. Is there? You destroyed your own ship to save your crew. A noble gesture. But did it work? They are drifting in escape pods, defenseless. If I ordered it, my fleet could scoop them up and turn them into biomass fuel within the hour. Your protection failed. Rian stiffened. The implant in his neck buzzed with a low, predatory hum. She was enjoying this. She was enjoying provoking him. But you haven't ordered it, Rian said quietly. No, she agreed, leaning in closer. Because I am curious, and because you amuse me. But do not mistake my curiosity for mercy. She spun on her heel and walked away. Keep up, human. Your legs are so short. They walked for hours. They visited the war room, a chamber carved entirely inside a captured meteor, where holographic maps of the galaxy floated in the dark. She showed him the invasion plans for a dozen worlds, watching his face for a reaction. Rian kept his expression stony, analyzing the tactical data, memorizing hyperlanes and fleet strengths. She knew he was doing it. She didn't care. To her, he was a pet looking at a chessboard. He might understand the pieces, but he couldn't play the game. Finally, they reached the memory hall. It was a long, silent corridor lined with statues made of solidified light. They depicted past emperors and empresses, towering figures of terrifying majesty. My father, Valera said, stopping before a statue of a Thalzin warrior with a jaw like a vice. He conquered the 3 systems of the Rim. He burned 100 worlds to bring order to chaos. He looks warm, Rian said dryly. He was a monster, Valera said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the earlier teasing, but he was a monster who held the sky up. When he died, the sector burned for 10 years in civil war. I stopped the burning. How? Rian asked. By becoming a bigger monster, she whispered. The implant flared again. This time, it wasn't anger or amusement. It was a cold, hollow ache, a gray, sinking feeling of exhaustion. It hit Ryan so hard he almost stumbled. He looked at her side profile. She looked imperious, untouchable. But the feedback loop told him she was tired, bone-deep tired of the weight she carried. He decided to take a risk. You know, he said, keeping his tone light, on Earth, when we want to stop a fire, we usually just use water. We don't try to scare the fire into submission. Valera looked at him, startled out of her reverie. The gray feeling vanished, replaced by a flash of bright, sparking annoyance. You are impertinent, she snapped, but the corner of her mouth twitched. And your metaphors are simplistic. You humans think everything can be solved with a hose and a handshake. Better than solving it with a boot to the neck, Rian countered. She laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, but it was real. You have a sharp tongue for a prisoner. Captain, be careful. I might decide to cut it out. If you did, who would tell you when you are being dramatic? Her eyes widened. The guards behind them hissed, stepping forward, but Valera held up a hand. She stared at Ryan, a mixture of shock and delight on her face. Dramatic? She repeated. I am the Empress of the Thousand Suns. I am the definition of drama. Ryan shrugged. If you say so. But the cape is a bit much. It is a gravitational mantle. Not a cape, she retorted, but she was smiling. For the rest of the walk, the tension between them shifted. It was still dangerous, still sharp, but it was no longer purely hostile. It was a game, a dance. She prodded him with insults about his soft skin and slow reflexes. He parried with dry observations about her court's theatrics. It was armor, Ryan realized. She used arrogance as a shield, he used humor. Underneath, they were both just two soldiers assessing the threat. The diplomatic reception was held in the observation spire, a glass-walled tower that offered a 300-degree view of the galaxy. The room was packed with delegates from the Cygnus Trade Alliance, short, stout beings with skin like polished leather and breathing apparatuses that wheezed softly. The air smelled of exotic spices and ozone. Servitors, floating drones with silver trays, drifted through the crowd, offering drinks that smoked and bubbled. Valera sat on a floating dais at the far end of the room, separated from the common rabble by a shimmering force field of social distance. She looked radiant and terrifying in a gown of woven starlight that shifted color with her movement. Ryan stood at the base of the dais, dressed in a formal version of his prisoner tunic, black with silver piping. He stood at parade rest, scanning the crowd. His job was to look decorative and intimidating. The implant in his neck was buzzing with a low-level static. Valera was bored. She despised these functions. He could feel her desire to be back in her war room, or even in the gravity gardens tormenting him. Boredom, disdain, a craving for silence. Ryan watched the crowd. His eyes moved in the saccadic rhythm of a sniper, sector to sector, face to face. A server drone drifted toward the dais. It was identical to the 100 other drones in the room, a sleek silver sphere with anti-grav thrusters. It carried a single tall flute of iridescent blue liquid, a toast for the Empress. Ryan watched it approach. Something was wrong. It wasn't the drone itself, it was the movement. The other drones drifted with a fluid, chaotic bob, correcting their flight paths constantly as guests bumped them. This drone moved in a perfect, mathematical straight line. It didn't react to the air currents. It was locked on. Ryan narrowed his eyes. The drone passed a Cygnus delegate. The delegate's breathing apparatus emitted a puff of vapor. The drone didn't adjust its thrusters to compensate for the thermal shift. It just sliced through the air. Hard-coded flight path, Ryan thought. No sensors. Why disable the sensors? Unless you don't want it to be jammed. The drone reached the edge of the dais. Valera reached out, her hand extending gracefully to take the flute. The implant in Ryan's neck screamed. It wasn't an emotion, it was a spike of adrenaline from Valera. A sudden subconscious realization of danger that her conscious mind hadn't processed yet. Ryan didn't think. He didn't calculate. He moved. He launched himself from his position, clearing the 3 steps of the dais in a single, explosive bound. "Valera!" he shouted. Valera looked up, her hand inches from the glass. The drone didn't slow down to offer the drink. It accelerated. The glass flute wasn't a drink, it was a delivery system. The liquid inside was bubbling violently, reacting to the proximity of her biofield. Ryan slammed into Valera. He hit her with a tackle perfect for a linebacker, his shoulder driving into her midsection, wrapping his arms around her waist. The momentum carried them both off the floating dais. As they fell, the drone detonated. It wasn't an explosion of fire, it was a shatterburst. The glass flute disintegrated into a cloud of microscopic shards, and the blue liquid vaporized into a neon mist. The mist didn't spread, it lunged, seeking the nearest neural signature. It sought the Empress. But Valira was gone, knocked out of the kill zone. The mist hissed against the empty throne, eating into the living vines, turning them gray and dead in an instant. Rian and Valira hit the floor hard. Rian took the brunt of the impact, twisting his body in midair so his back struck the polished stone. Valira landed on top of him, her armor clattering against the floor. For a second, the world was chaos. Screams from the delegates, guards shouting, the sound of weapons charging. But inside the tangle of limbs on the floor, there was a different kind of chaos. Ryan's arms were locked tight around Valira, one hand pressing her head into his chest to shield her face, the other clamped around her waist. Her body was pressed against his, the cold plates of her armor digging into his ribs, but beneath the armor, he felt the heat of her. The implant exploded, and it wasn't just feedback this time. It was a flood. Shock, pure white-hot shock. Fear, sharp and metallic. Rage, a red tidal wave. And then, underneath it all, something else. As Ryan held her, shielding her from the falling debris, the connection went both ways. He felt her heart hammering against his chest, sinking with his own. He felt the heat rising in her skin, and she felt him. The implant pushed his emotions back into her. She felt his terrifying, singular focus on protection. She felt his fear, not for himself, but for her. She felt the raw, biological instinct of a human male shielding his mate, a sensation so primal and foreign to her that it hit her like a drug. For 3 seconds, they lay there, frozen in the intimacy of violence. Rian looked down. Valira looked up. Her golden eyes were blown wide, the pupils dilated. Her lips were parted, her breath coming in ragged gasps that mingled with his. The contact was electric. It burned. It wasn't just skin on armor. It was mind on mind. Ryan felt a surge of arousal, sharp, sudden, and completely inappropriate, spark through the link. And he felt Valira feel it. He felt her react to it. A sudden answering spike of heat in her belly, a confusion that swirled with the anger. She didn't pull away. She leaned in, just a fraction of an inch, her body betraying her mind. Then the guards were there. "Protect the Empress," Keth roared, his shadow falling over them. The spell broke. Valira scrambled backward, pushing off Ryan's chest with enough force to bruise. She stood up, her chest heaving, her armor rattling. Ryan rolled to his feet, hands raised, panting. The room was in bedlam. But Valira wasn't looking at the assassin. She wasn't looking at the guards. She was looking at Ryan. Her face was a mask of fury, her cheeks glowing a violent, humiliated orange. But her eyes were terrified. "Clear the room," she screamed. "Get them out." The secure chamber was a small, soundproof box of steel and silence deep in the palace's core. Rian stood in the center, his hands hanging by his sides. Valira paced. She was a tiger in a cage, moving back and forth with frantic energy. She had refused to let the medics touch her. She had ordered everyone out except Ryan. "You threw me," she shouted, spinning to face him. "You threw me to the ground like baggage." "I saved your life," Ryan shouted back, his patience snapping. The feedback loop was still open, and he could feel her chaotic emotions scraping against his nerves like sandpaper. That drink was a neurotoxin. "I saw the flight path. You humiliated me," she snarled, stalking toward him. "In front of the Alliance, in front of my court, you put your hands on me again. Is that what this is about?" Rian stepped forward, meeting her glare. "You're mad because I touched you? Lady, if I hadn't touched you, you'd be a vegetable right now." That mist was a neural override virus. I saw it eat the throne. I am the Empress. I am untouchable. You are flesh and blood, Rian yelled. Just like the rest of us. And today, you almost died. The words hung in the air. Valira stopped pacing. She stood trembling, her fists clenched at her sides. The implant hummed. The anger was draining away, leaving behind something jagged and raw. Fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of weakness. She looked at Ryan. She looked at his hands, the hands that had held her. You enjoyed it, she whispered, her voice venomous but shaking. I felt it. The link. I felt you. You enjoyed my weakness. You enjoyed having me on the floor, helpless under you. Rian didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He took a breath, forcing his own emotions to steady. I felt you too, Valira, he said softly. She flinched as if he had slapped her. I felt your fear, Ryan continued, stepping closer. I felt your heart racing, but I didn't enjoy your weakness. I enjoyed knowing you were safe. He pointed to his chest. Where I come from, that's not dominance. That's duty. Valira stared at him. The glow in her cheeks faded to a dull, bruised purple. She slumped, the fight suddenly draining out of her legs. She reached out and grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. They are inside, she said. Her voice was broken glass. What? The assassin, she whispered. The drone passed the perimeter scans. It passed the biofilters. It had the royal encryption keys. She looked up at Ryan, her eyes wide and wet. Someone in the inner circle programmed it. Someone I eat with. Someone I rule with. Rian nodded slowly. He had suspected as much. Dracul? He asked. She shook her head. Maybe. Or Krell. Or any of them. They all smile. They all bow. And they all want the throne. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You were right. Human. I am a monster. But I am a monster surrounded by other monsters. And I am tired of watching my back. Rian walked over to her. He stopped a few feet away, respecting the line she had drawn, but close enough to speak quietly. On Earth, he said, we have a saying, a leader who trusts no one eventually destroys herself. You build walls to keep the enemies out, but you end up locking yourself in with the fear. Valira looked at him. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the mockery, the trick. And what is the alternative? She asked. Trust. Trust is a weakness. It is a gap in the armor. No, Rian said. Trust is a shield. But you have to let someone else hold it for you. The silence stretched between them. The implant was quiet now, humming with a strange, resonant melancholy. Valira looked at Ryan's hands again. She remembered the heat of them, the weight. Get out, she whispered. Ryan paused. Leave me, she said, louder. Go back to your quarters. Rian nodded. He turned and walked to the door. Captain, she called out just as the door opened. He looked back. She was standing straight again, the Empress mask back in place, but her eyes were soft. If you ever tackle me again, make sure you land on the bottom. Rian smiled, a tired, genuine smile. Yes, Your Majesty. The deep scan of the palace systems took 3 hours. It came back clean. Clean. Valira sat in her private sanctum looking at the holographic report. No unauthorized access. No external hacks. The drone had been programmed with a command code that belonged to the highest tier of the security clearance. Her tier. Or Dracul's. She dismissed the hologram with a swipe of her hand. The room was dark, lit only by the bioluminescent plants in the corner. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the blue-white star burned in the void. She wrapped her arms around herself. She was wearing a silk robe, thin and soft. She ran her hands up her own arms, gripping her shoulders. She closed her eyes. The memory hit her instantly. The smell of him, sweat and soap and human warmth, the hardness of his chest, the way his arm had clamped around her waist, immovable, solid. For a moment, on that floor, amidst the glass and the poison, she hadn't been the Empress. She hadn't been a target. She had been held. The sensation was terrifying. It made her stomach twist with nausea. It went against every lesson her father had beaten into her. To need is to die. But the memory of his emotions, the raw, unfiltered protectiveness she had felt through the link, it wouldn't fade. He hadn't been trying to own her. He had been trying to keep her. She hated him for it. She hated him for seeing her fear. And she wanted him to do it again. Valera let out a shuddering breath, her fingers digging into her own skin, trying to erase the ghost of his touch. But the ghost stayed. In the darkness of the palace, the Empress of the Thalzen Dominion stood alone, and for the first time in 100 years, she was afraid of the dark. The official manifest listed the trip as a routine inspection of Sector 12, a dredging operation on the edge of the Dominion's charted space. Valera stood on the flight deck of the Void Singer, her personal transport, and watched the palace shrink into a glittering diamond against the velvet backdrop of space. She did not look like an empress on a dredging survey. She wore a combat suit of matte black weave, stripped of the ceremonial bulk of her court armor. A pulse rifle was strapped to her thigh, and her hair was braided tight against her skull. Rian stood behind her, checking the seals on his own gear. He felt ridiculous. They had given him a Thalzen light armor vest that was designed for someone with a longer torso and 2 extra ribs. It dug into his hips every time he moved. "You are fidgeting," Valera said without turning around. Her voice was calm, but the implant at the base of Ryan's skull buzzed with a low-frequency hum of anxiety. "This vest was designed for a praying mantis," Rian muttered, adjusting a strap. "And I still do not understand why I am here. If you suspect treason at this station, why not bring a squad of your Imperial Guard? Why bring the human who tripped over your throne?" Valera turned then. Her golden eyes were hard. "Because the Imperial Guard answers to the High Council as much as they answer to me," she said. "If my suspicions are correct, the guards might be ordered to have a tragic accident involving their Empress. You, Captain Hale, are outside the chain of command. You are expendable to them. And to me, you are unconnected." "Unconnected," Ryan repeated. "That is a nice way of saying I am the only one who does not have a knife already poised at your back." "Precisely." The Void Singer was not a ship built in a shipyard. It was grown. The hull was cultivated from the tissue of star whales, reinforced with carbon lattice bones. The interior walls were warm to the touch and pulsed with a faint, rhythmic heartbeat. It was unsettling, like riding inside the belly of a beast that had swallowed you whole. They were heading into the shattered corridor. It was a region of space where the physics of the universe had been broken during the ancient wars. As the ship slipped into the anomaly, the view screen became a window into madness. Rian stepped forward, mesmerized. Outside, the stars did not twinkle. They smeared. Gravity folds twisted light into impossible geometries. He saw a planet the size of Jupiter that had been cracked open like an egg, its molten core frozen in the act of spilling out, suspended in a time lock. He saw rings made of frozen lightning that crackled in silence. Wrecked warships from 1,000 years ago hung in fractured orbits, their hulls twisted into spirals by gravity tides. "Keep your eyes inside the ship," Valera warned. Staring at the corridor for too long causes madness in lesser minds. The geometry disagrees with the biological brain. I have seen worse, Rian said, though he pulled his gaze away. We have 3 hours until we reach Station Xylos, Valera announced. The ship flies itself. Come. You look stiff. If we are walking into a trap, I need you mobile. There was only one room on the Void Singer with a stable gravity generator suitable for combat training. It was a circular chamber with padded walls that sweated a faint, cooling mist. Valera stripped off her outer jacket, revealing the lean, corded muscle of her arms. She moved with a predatory grace, stretching her limbs. Show me, she commanded. Show you what? How a species with no claws, no venom, and no exoskeleton managed to survive long enough to build spaceships. Show me how you fight. Rian hesitated. I am not going to hit you, Your Majesty. Valera laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. You think you can hit me? Try. She didn't wait. She launched herself at him. It wasn't a brawl. It was a physics lesson. Thalzen combat was fluid, designed for zero gravity and magnetic boots. She moved like water, spinning around his guard, using momentum rather than brute strength. Rian barely got his arms up in time to block a kick that would have taken his head off. He staggered back, his boots squeaking on the damp floor. The implant flared. She was enjoying this. The anxiety was gone, replaced by the clean, sharp focus of adrenaline. Rian switched gears. He stopped trying to match her fluidity and went grounded. Human. Krav Maga and Marine Corps dirty boxing. When she came in for a sweeping strike, he didn't dodge. He stepped into the arc, jamming his shoulder into her chest to break her momentum. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs. He swept her leg. Valera fell, but she twisted in the air like a cat, turning the fall into a roll. She came up smiling. Better, she said, breathless. Again. They sparred for an hour. The room grew hot. Sweat slicked their skin, making the grapples slippery and desperate. They were evenly matched in a strange way, her speed against his density, her reach against his leverage. During a particularly intense exchange, Valera fainted high and went low. Rian anticipated it. He sidestepped and caught her arm, using her own momentum to spin her around. She lost her footing on a patch of condensation. She started to go down hard, instinctively. Rian lunged to catch her before she cracked her head on the deck plates. His arm hooked around her waist, but his other hand, seeking purchase, slid down the slick material of her combat suit. It grazed the back of her thigh, fingers curling briefly into the muscle to haul her upright. Valera froze. Rian froze. They were tangled together, chest to chest, Rian holding her up, his hand burning where it touched her leg. The memory of the throne room crashed into the space between them. Rian pulled his hand back instantly, holding it up in surrender. Slippery floor, he said, his voice rough. Valera did not pull away. She stood there, her chest heaving, sweat dripping from her temple. The implant was screaming, a chaotic mix of shock, memory, and a sudden spiking heat that had nothing to do with combat. She looked at him. Her pupils were blown wide. You have a habit of catching me human, she said softly. I have a habit of not letting my assets get damaged, Rian replied, trying to keep his tone professional. Valera stepped closer. She invaded his personal space, forcing him to look down at her. Her scent was overpowering, ozone and that strange, sweet alien spice. Tell me, Captain, she whispered, her voice dropping to that dangerous register she used in court. Do human males enjoy making empresses feel off balance? Is that your strategy? Rian looked into her eyes. He could have stepped back. He could have apologized. But the adrenaline was still pumping, and he was tired of being the pet. I enjoy getting under your skin, he admitted, his voice low. Why? Because when you are off balance, you forget to be the Empress, Rian said. You forget to be a statue. You become real. Valera's eyes blazed. The bioluminescence in her cheeks flared a soft, dusty rose. Real is dangerous. Rian, she said. Real gets people killed. Then she laughed. It was a low, throaty sound that vibrated in Ryan's chest. She turned and walked to the door, grabbing her towel. Clean up, Captain. We arrive in 20 minutes, and try not to grab any more royal appendages. I would hate to have to explain to the council why I broke your fingers. Rian watched her go, his heart hammering a rhythm against his ribs that took a long time to slow down. Station Xylos was a tomb. It was an ugly utilitarian structure clinging to an asteroid in the middle of a debris field. As the Void Singer docked, the silence of the place felt heavy. There were no running lights, no comms chatter. Valera and Ryan moved through the airlock, weapons drawn. The station's atmosphere was stale, smelling of recycled air and ozone. It is too quiet, Rian whispered. Valera tapped a command into her wrist gauntlet. The station's schematics projected into the air. Main power is offline, she said. But the secondary reactors are running at 40%. That is enough to power the life support and something else. They moved deeper into the station, moving through corridors lined with dormant machinery. They reached the central manufacturing bay, a cavernous room filled with towering machines that looked like giant metallic spiders. Nanoforges, Valera said, her voice tight. These were ordered decommissioned 50 years ago. They are illegal under the Galactic Concordat. They weren't decommissioned, they were humming. Rian walked over to a console. He wiped a layer of dust from the screen. It flickered to life. Look at this, he said. Valera looked. The screen displayed a production log, neural lattice emitters. She read, Batch 700, destination, unlisted. She slammed her fist onto the console, denting the metal. They are building mind control weapons, she hissed. My own council, using my resources. She moved to the main data core, a pillar of blue light in the center of the room. She began to type furiously, overriding the locks. I need the destination logs, she muttered. I need to know where they are sending them. A holographic face appeared in the air above the core. It was a standard Thalzan interface avatar, featureless and gray. Access denied, the AI said, its voice flat. Security clearance Alpha 1 required. I am the Empress Valera, she shouted. I am Alpha 1. Identity confirmed, the AI replied. However, override protocol Draco 0 is in effect. All logs are sealed by order of the High Minister. Valera snarled and raised her fist to smash the emitter. Don't, Rian said, catching her wrist. You break the emitter, we lose the data forever. Let me try. You, Valera scoffed. This is Thalzan military encryption, and it is running on a logic loop, Rian said. He knelt by the maintenance panel of the core. He pulled out his boot knife and pried the cover off. Underneath was a nest of optical cables. Rian pulled out his data pad, a clunky, battered piece of human tech. He jammed a connector into the port. Your AI is smart. Rian grunted, typing commands. It thinks in complex patterns. But sometimes, smart things are stupid because they don't expect a brick through the window. He initiated a brute force overflow attack. He flooded the AI's logic centers with billions of junk data requests, weather reports from Earth, recipes for lasagna, centuries of sports statistics. The AI avatar flickered, processing. Error. Data load exceeds. Now, Rian shouted. Override it while it is confused. Valira slammed her hand onto the biometric scanner. The AI, overwhelmed by the digital noise, accepted her DNA signature as a priority interrupt. Access granted. The AI groaned. The data streamed onto Valira's wrist computer. Coordinates, names, shipping manifests. And there, at the top of the list, High Minister Dracul. We have them. Valira breathed. We have them all. Suddenly, the lights in the bay turned red. A siren began to wail, a bone-shaking, rhythmic scream. Unauthorized access detected. The AI announced, its voice suddenly clear and malicious. Self-destruct sequence initiated. Containment purge in 120 seconds. Run! Rian yelled. He grabbed Valira's arm and they sprinted. The station began to die around them. Bulkheads slammed shut, trying to seal them in. Gravity generators failed, sending them careening off the walls. They reached the main corridor leading back to the airlock. A plasma conduit in the ceiling burst, showering the hallway with liquid fire. They skidded to a halt. The fire blocked the path. "The vents!" Ryan shouted, pointing to a maintenance hatch near the floor. He kicked the grate open. Valira didn't argue. She dove in, crawling on her hands and knees. Rian followed, the heat of the plasma licking at his boots. They scrambled through the narrow, dark tunnel. The station shuddered violently. Explosions were rocking the lower levels, tearing the asteroid apart. They emerged into a secondary hangar bay. It was chaos. Debris was falling from the ceiling. The airlock to the Void Singer was across the room, but the gantry-way was collapsing. "Jump!" Valira commanded. She leaped across a widening gap in the floor. She made it, landing in a roll. Rian followed. He landed hard, his ankle twisting, but he scrambled up. A massive support beam from the ceiling gave way. It swung down like a pendulum, aiming straight for Valira. She didn't see it. She was looking at the airlock controls. "Valira!" Ryan didn't think. He threw himself at her. He couldn't tackle her high. The beam was coming in at head level. He dove low. His hands clamped onto her hips, the only solid point of leverage, and he heaved her sideways with every ounce of hysterical strength he possessed. He threw her into the open mouth of a maintenance escape pod set into the wall. Rian scrambled in after her just as the beam smashed into the floor where she had been standing, obliterating the metal plating. He slammed his fist onto the ejection button. The hatch hissed shut. Valira was sprawled against the back of the tiny pod. Rian was pressed against her, his hands still gripping her hips to stabilize them against the launch force. She shoved him, her face flushed, eyes wild. "You are obsessed!" she screamed over the roar of the thrusters. "You keep grabbing me there!" "It keeps saving your life," Rian roared back. The pod fired. The G-force hit them like a physical blow, pinning them together. The pod shot out of the station like a bullet. Behind them, station Xylos died. It didn't explode in fire. The reactor collapse created a momentary singularity. The station crumpled inward, imploding into a point of infinite density, then flashed out of existence in a silent, blinding shockwave of white light. The shockwave hit the pod. The tiny vessel tumbled end over end. Ryan and Valira were thrown against each other, limbs tangled, bodies slamming against the padded walls. Then, the stabilizers kicked in. The tumbling stopped. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. They were drifting in the dark, miles away from the debris field. The Void Singer was gone, either destroyed or autopiloted to a safe distance. The pod was designed for one maintenance worker. It was a coffin with a window. Rian was pinned against Valira. There was nowhere to move. His chest was pressed against hers. His legs were tangled with hers. His face was inches from her neck. He could feel her trembling. He tried to pull back, to give her an inch of space, but there was no room. The implant in his neck began to sing. It wasn't the sharp spike of adrenaline anymore. It was a swirling, dizzying cocktail of chemicals and neurons. Relief. The crushing weight of being alive when you should be dead. Pain. The bruising on her side where he had grabbed her. And underneath it, a hot, rising tide of arousal. It was biological. It was the reaction to survival. The body's desperate need to affirm life in the face of death. But it was amplified by the proximity. Rian could feel every curve of her body against his. He could feel the rapid, shallow breaths she took, and she could feel him. Valera squeezed her eyes shut. She turned her head away, her cheek pressed against the cold wall of the pod. "Stop it," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. "Stop what?" Rian breathed, his voice hoarse. "Stop feeling," she said. "I can feel you. Rian, I can feel how much you want to be here, and how much you hate that you want it." Rian closed his eyes. He couldn't block it. The translator didn't have an off switch. "I can't help it," he said. Valera let out a shuddering breath. She turned her head slowly, until she was looking at him. Her eyes were not glowing with their usual power. They were dim, soft, and terrifyingly open. "I haven't let anyone this close to me in 20 years, she confessed. "Not since I took the throne. Not physically, not like this." "Why?" Rian asked. "Because closeness is a vulnerability," she said. "If you are close, you can see the cracks." Rian shifted his weight, trying to ease the pressure on her, but it only brought his hips tighter against hers. She gasped, a small, sharp sound. "I see the cracks, Valera," Rian said softly. "I have seen them since the first day." "And yet you are still here," she murmured. Why did you save me? You could have let the beam hit me. You could have been free." Rian looked at her lips. They were trembling. "I don't know." He lied. Then the implant betrayed him. A wave of protective tenderness washed out of him, so strong it was almost visible. It slammed into Valera, stripping away the lie. She stared at him, stunned by the intensity of the emotion. "You are terrified," she whispered, reading his mind through the link. "You are terrified of me." "No," Rian said. He lifted a hand, hesitating, then brushed a stray lock of silver hair from her forehead. His fingers lingered on her skin. "I am not afraid of you, Valera. I am terrified because I am starting to care what happens to you. And in your world, caring gets people killed." Valera fell silent. She looked at him, really looked at him, stripping away the rank and the species and the politics. She saw a man who was bruised, exhausted, and trapped in a box with a monster, and who looked at the monster with worry instead of hate. She leaned into his hand, just a fraction. It was a surrender. "We are going to die out here," she whispered. "The life support is only good for 6 hours." "Then we have 6 hours," Rian said. He didn't kiss her. It was too much, too soon. But he didn't pull away either. He rested his forehead against hers. They breathed the same stale air floating in the void. 2 heartbeats sinking in the dark, waiting for the end or the rescue, neither willing to let go. The return to the royal spire was not a homecoming. It was a descent into a grave that had already been dug. The Void Singer, piloted by its automated recovery protocols, docked silently in the private hangar of the upper palace. The airlock hissed open, revealing the polished golden walkways of the high tower. Ryan Hale stepped out first, his weapon raised, scanning the shadows. Empress Valera followed, her combat suit scorched and torn, her face smeared with the grease of a dying space station. She expected the Imperial Guard to be waiting. She expected medics. She expected the hushed reverence of her court, relieved that their monarch had survived the anomaly. Instead, she found silence. The hangar bay was empty. The lights were dimmed to a low, throbbing red, the color of a containment alert. "Something is wrong," Ryan said, his voice low. The implant at the base of his skull was buzzing with a static charge, picking up a background radiation of hostility from the palace network itself. Valera tapped her wrist gauntlet. "Command override Alpha 1. Status report." The air above them shivered. A holographic projection materialized, but it was not the palace AI. It was the face of High Minister Dracul. He looked larger than life, his violet eyes magnified to the size of dinner plates, his expression one of mournful severity. "Empress Valera," Dracul's voice boomed, echoing off the hangar walls. "It is with a heavy heart that the Council acknowledges your return, and your failure." Valera straightened her spine, the exhaustion falling away instantly. "Explain yourself, Minister. Why is my hangar in lockdown?" "Because you are a traitor to the stability of the Dominion," Dracul replied smoothly. "We have analyzed the telemetry from Station Xylos. You went there without authorization. You bypassed safety protocols. And in your reckless arrogance, you triggered a reactor overload that destroyed vital military infrastructure." "That station was building illegal weapons," Valera shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "Weapons you authorized. Dracul, I have the logs. The logs you claim to have are corrupted," Dracul said, shaking his head with mock pity. "Fabrications created by a desperate ruler trying to justify her incompetence. The Council has voted Valera. We have declared you mentally unfit. You are a danger to the Empire." He leaned closer to the pickup, his smile thin and cruel. "You are no longer the Empress. You are a security risk." The hologram vanished. In the same second, the hangar's automated defense grid came online. 6 ceiling-mounted turrets, sleek chrome teardrops that Valera herself had designed, pivoted downward. Their tracking lasers painted 6 red dots on her chest. "Run!" Rian yelled. He didn't wait for her to process the betrayal. He grabbed the strap of her combat harness and yanked her sideways just as the air filled with the crackle of ionized plasma. Bolts of blue energy scorched the deck where she had been standing, melting the gold plating into slag. Valera stumbled, shock freezing her limbs. Her own palace, her own walls. They were trying to kill her. Rian shoved her behind a stack of cargo crates as the turrets chewed through the metal. "We can't go to the lifts," Rian shouted over the roar of the fire. "They will have the corridors locked down." "Where then?" Valera gasped, pressing her back against the crate. She pulled her pulse rifle, checking the charge, her hands shaking with a rage so cold it burned. "The service tunnels," Rian said. "I mapped them when I disabled the sensors in my room. There is an intake vent 30 meters east. 30 meters through a kill zone? "Trust me," Rian said. He looked at her, his blue eyes steady in the chaos. "Do you trust me?" Valera looked at the human. The implant in her neck hummed, not with fear, but with a solid, grounding resolve. He wasn't afraid. He was working. "Lead," she said. Ryan moved. He broke cover, firing 3 precise shots at the nearest turret's sensor array, blinding it. He laid down a suppression pattern, drawing the fire of the remaining guns. Valera sprinted. She ran low, her movements fluid despite the gravity, her boots skidding on the polished floor. She reached the vent grate and blew the locking bolts with 2 shots. She kicked the grate in and dove into the darkness. Rian followed a second later, a plasma bolt singeing the heel of his boot. He scrambled into the shaft and sealed the grate behind them, welding it shut with a sustained burst from his rifle. They lay in the dark, breathing hard, the smell of ozone and burning metal filling the cramped space. "Welcome to the underbelly, Your Majesty," Rian wheezed, The escape was a grueling, filthy descent. The service tunnels were not designed for people. They were designed for drones and waste reclamation. The walls were slick with condensation and oil. The air was thick with the smell of recycled biological matter. For 2 hours, they crawled. They shimmied down vertical shafts that dropped into the bowels of the city ship. They dodged maintenance drones that had been repurposed as trackers, their optical sensors sweeping the dark with red beams. Rian led the way, his internal map surprisingly accurate. He moved with the efficiency of a rat in a maze, sensing air currents, listening for the hum of machinery. Valyra followed, but with every meter they descended, a piece of her fractured. She was the Empress of the 1,000 Suns. She had been raised in the high tower, bathed in starlight, fed nectar and ambrosia. She had never touched grime. She had never crawled on her hands and knees in the dark. But it wasn't the dirt that broke her. It was the knowledge that the people she had ruled, the council she had sat with, had erased her existence with a single vote. They stopped in a junction chamber deep in the reclamation sector to catch their breath. Valyra slumped against a rusted pipe, wiping a smear of black grease from her cheek. Her silver hair was matted. Her armor was scratched. She looked at her hands. They were trembling. "They turned the house against me," she whispered. Her voice sounded small in the echoing tunnel. "The turrets. I named them. I calibrated them. And they looked at me and saw a target. It is just code." "Valyra," Rian said gently, checking the charge on his rifle. Dracul rewrote the definitions. "No," she said, her voice cracked. "It is not just code. It is the truth." She looked up at him, and for the first time, Rian saw the girl beneath the armor, the scared child who had been forced to wear a crown that was too heavy. "My parents were assassinated in the throne room," she said. "Did you know that? I was 6 cycles old. I was hiding behind the dais. I watched High Minister Krell, Dracul's predecessor, pour poison into their wine. I watched them choke. I watched them die clawing at their throats." Rian stopped what he was doing. He moved closer, crouching in front of her. "Krell told me it was a heart failure," Valyra continued, tears cutting tracks through the grease on her face. "He told me the universe was cruel and that only strength mattered. He put me on the throne the next day. My feet didn't even touch the floor." She let out a shuddering breath. "I learned to be stone. I learned to be ice. I killed the softness in me because softness is where the knife goes in. I made them fear me because fear was the only wall I had. And now," she gestured helplessly at the dark tunnel, "now I am nothing. I have no throne. I have no fear to protect me. I am just a woman in a sewer, hiding from her own shadow." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The implant in Rian's neck ached. He felt her desolation. It was a bottomless, cold well of loneliness. It was the feeling of a child who had been screaming for help for 20 years in a soundproof room. Rian reached out. He took her hands and pulled them away from her face. "Look at me," he commanded, softly, but with an order's weight. Valyra looked at him, her golden eyes swimming with tears. "Fear is a fragile throne." "Valyra," Rian said, "you build it high, but it stands on glass. People pretend to obey the monster. But the moment the monster bleeds, they run, or they attack." He squeezed her hands. "But you are not nothing. You are the woman who flew into a gravity storm to find the truth. You are the woman who spared my life when everyone told you to kill me. You are the woman who held on to me in that pod so I wouldn't break my neck. That was survival," she whispered. "No," Rian said. "That was loyalty." He leaned in closer, his face inches from hers in the gloom. Real loyalty doesn't come from being worshipped. Valira, it comes from being seen. It comes from letting someone see the cracks and having them decide to stand by you anyway. He released her hands and tapped his own chest. I see you. I see the girl behind the dais, and I am telling you, she is stronger than the Empress ever was, because the Empress needed armor. You are surviving this with nothing but your own 2 hands. Valira stared at him. The words hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. She sniffed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so unroyal it made Ryan smile. You have a way with speeches human, she murmured. I watch a lot of movies, Ryan said, standing up and offering her a hand. Come on. We need to move. If we stay here, the smell alone will kill us. Valira took his hand. Her grip was strong. They emerged 3 hours later in a cargo bay on the lowest level of the palace's docking ring. It was a place for smugglers and waste haulers, far from the gleaming eyes of the High Council. Rian hot-wired a transport shuttle, a battered, rust-bucket cargo hauler that smelled of processed algae. He bypassed the ignition lock with a piece of wire and a curse. Get in the back, Rian said. Keep your head down. They blasted out of the hangar before the perimeter grid could lock onto them, diving into the heavy traffic of the trade lanes. Ryan navigated them toward a nearby moon, a frantic, neon-lit trade hub called Gideon's Rock. It was a hive of scum and villainy, and it was perfect. They landed in a sub-level dock where no one asked for IDs as long as you paid in hard credits. Rian had a stash of emergency currency in his boot, a universal credit chip he had swiped during his initial escape attempt weeks ago. Valira had to discard her armor. It was too conspicuous. Rian found a vendor selling surplus worker gear. He bought her a heavy, rough-spun cloak with a deep hood and a portable dampening field generator that clipped to her belt, obscuring her biosignature. For the first time in her life, Valira walked through a crowd without a phalanx of guards. She walked close to Ryan, her head bowed, clutching the edges of the cloak. The sensation was overwhelming. The noise, the smells, the bodies pressing against her. People didn't part for her. They bumped into her. Watch it. Spacer. A 4-eyed dock worker grunted as he slammed his shoulder into hers. Valira stiffened, her hand instinctively going to the empty space where her sword usually hung. Ryan grabbed her elbow and steered her away. Keep moving, he whispered. You are a nobody here. Remember that. They passed a group of traders gathered around a holographic news terminal. The screen showed Dracul's face. Empress Valira has been declared a fugitive, the broadcast announced. A reward of 50 million credits is offered for her capture, dead or alive. 50 million? One of the traders whistled. For the Ice Queen? I heard she eats the hearts of her lovers. Good riddance. Another spat on the floor. Maybe the council will lower the grain tax now that she is gone. She never cared about the Outer Rim anyway. Let her rot. Valira stopped. She stood frozen, listening to the venom in their voices. Rian pulled her gently. Don't listen. They hate me, she whispered, her voice hidden by the hood. I thought they feared me, but they just hate me. Rian didn't answer. He just kept his hand on her back, a steady pressure guiding her through the hostile tide. The lodging cube was named the Celestial Rest, which was a lie. It was a stacked metal container in a dimly lit alleyway that smelled of frying oil and engine coolant. The proprietor was a gelatinous blob of a creature inside a containment suit. It blinked 3 vertical eyes at them. One room, Ryan said, sliding the credit chip across the counter. For one night. Name? The creature gurgled. Smith, Ryan said. And Mrs. Smith. The creature's eyes swiveled to Valira, who was huddled in her cloak. "Honeymoon?" the creature asked. "Something like that," Ryan said. The creature tapped a button. "I have the Deluxe suite available. Includes romance lighting and vibration settings. Special discount for humans. You people like the vibration, yes?" Valira made a choking sound. Ryan kicked her ankle gently. "We love vibration," Ryan said with a straight face. "Just give us the key." The room was terrible. It was a 3-by-3-meter cube with a single, narrow sleeping platform attached to the wall. The romance lighting was a flickering pink neon strip that buzzed like a dying insect. The walls were thin. They could hear the thrum of industrial machinery from the factory next door. Valira threw back her hood and stared at the bed. "I am not sleeping on that," she announced. "It looks like a medical slab. It is a bed." "Valira," Ryan said, locking the door and engaging the dampener. "It is softish, and it is safe. That is all that matters." He sat down on the edge of the mattress and pulled off his boots. He groaned, rubbing his face. He was exhausted. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been beaten with a hammer. Valira stood in the center of the room, looking lost. Without her armor, without her title, standing in a pink-lit box. She looked incredibly small. "Come on," Ryan said, patting the space beside him. "I promise I won't kick." She sat down gingerly, as if the mattress might bite her. They ate nutrient bars Ryan had bought from a vending machine. They tasted like sawdust and chocolate, but Valira ate hers ravenously. When it was time to sleep, the awkwardness descended like a physical weight. There was only one bed. It was narrow. "I will take the floor," Ryan offered. "Don't be stupid," Valira snapped, though her voice lacked heat. "The floor is metal. You need rest if you're going to protect me tomorrow. We will share." They lay down back to back, fully clothed. Ryan faced the door, his hand resting near his hidden boot knife. Valira faced the wall. The silence stretched. The pink light flickered. Ryan could feel the tension radiating off her. The implant was quiet, transmitting only a low, steady hum of alertness. She wasn't sleeping. She was listening to the machinery outside, her muscles coiled tight. Suddenly, a loud boom from the factory shook the walls. Valira flinched violently. Ryan felt the jerk of her body against his back. He felt a spike of terror from the link, a sudden, sharp memory of an explosion, of a station collapsing, of parents choking. She shifted. Ryan felt her hand move behind her, her fingers brushing against the fabric of his shirt. She hooked a finger into his belt loop. It was a tentative, desperate anchor. Ryan lay still for a moment, letting her hold on. Then slowly, he turned over. He moved carefully, telegraphing every motion so he wouldn't startle her. He shifted until he was facing her back. "Valira," he whispered. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away. Ryan slid his arm over her waist. He pulled her backward until her back was pressed against his chest. He tucked his chin over her shoulder, spooning her. He felt her stiffen. For a second, he thought she would strike him. The Empress did not allow herself to be Little Spoon. But then, she exhaled. It was a long, ragged breath that seemed to deflate her entire body. She melted back into him. The contact was electric. It wasn't sexual, it was deeper than that. It was the desperate, starving need for another living thing in the dark. Ryan's hand rested on her stomach, his thumb tracing a slow, soothing circle on the rough fabric of her borrowed tunic. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart slowing down, syncing with his own. The implant flared, safety, warmth, confusion, desire. Valira turned in his arms. It was a struggle in the narrow bed, but she shifted until she was facing him. Their faces were inches apart in the neon gloom. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She reached up and touched his jaw, her fingers tracing the stubble there. It was a touch of wonder, as if she were inspecting a strange new species. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the room. "Do what?" Ryan asked. "This," she said, gesturing to the space between them. "I don't know how to be held without feeling like I am surrendering. When you hold me, I feel like I am giving you a weapon to destroy me." Ryan covered her hand with his own, pressing her palm against his cheek. "Touch isn't surrender, Valera," he said softly. "It is a choice. You are choosing to let me in, and I am choosing to keep the weapon sheathed." He moved his hand to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her silver hair. He felt her shiver, a ripple that went through her entire body. "You are shaking," he murmured. "Because I am seen," she whispered, "and it is terrifying." She closed the distance. She pressed her forehead against his. They breathed together, sharing the same air. Ryan felt her defenses crumble completely. There was no Empress here, no captain. Just a man and a woman in a cheap room at the end of the universe, clinging to each other because the alternative was falling into the void. Valera closed her eyes. For the first time in 20 years, she felt safe, not because she was powerful, but because she was held. "Do not let go," she breathed against his lips. "I've got you," Ryan promised. They didn't kiss. The moment was too fragile for that, too heavy with unsaid things. They just lay there, wrapped in each other, until the exhaustion finally dragged them under. Morning came with the harsh reality of white sunlight streaming through the dirty window. Ryan woke first. He was tangled in limbs. Valera's head was on his chest, her leg thrown over his. He lay there for a moment, just breathing, before the soldier in him kicked in. "We have work to do," he thought. He shifted, and Valera woke instantly. She sat up, blinking, her hair a wild silver halo. She looked at him. She looked at the position they were in. Her cheeks flushed a brilliant bioluminescent pink. She cleared her throat and scrambled off the bed, smoothing her tunic with aggressive dignity. "The ventilation in here is inadequate," she announced, refusing to make eye contact. It was necessary to conserve body heat, extremely necessary. Ryan agreed, sitting up and hiding a smile. "Survival tactics, Your Majesty." "Right, survival." She grabbed her cloak and threw it on, composing herself. But as she turned to the door, she paused. She looked back at him, and for a second, the mask slipped. She gave him a small, shy smile that transformed her face. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the heat conservation?" "Anytime." They left the Celestial Rest and headed for the lower markets. Ryan knew where to go. He needed a broker. They found him in the back of a cybernetic shop that sold second-hand limbs. His name was Jinx, a rodent-like alien with cybernetic goggles and a nervous twitch. "Ryan," Jinx squeaked, dropping a mechanical arm he was polishing. "You are supposed to be dead, or in prison, or eating grapes with the Empress." "I am doing a bit of all three," Ryan said. "Jinx, I need a trace." Ryan pulled out the data chip he had salvaged from the Void Singer's backup buffer before they landed. It contained the encrypted packet Valera had pulled from the station. "I need you to crack this. I need to know where the shipment went." Jinx slotted the chip into his terminal. He whistled. "1,000 military grade. Nasty stuff. If I crack this, my brain might melt." "If you don't crack it," Ryan said, leaning on the counter, "I will tell the local guild you are selling refurbished police tech." Jinx grumbled and started typing. Valera watched from the shadows of her hood, her hand on her blaster. 10 minutes later, Jinx stopped. He looked pale. This isn't just a shipment. Ryan, this is a broadcast network. Where? Valera demanded, stepping forward. Jinx jumped at the sound of her voice. He looked at the hooded figure, then at the screen. It is a gas giant in the Sigma cluster. Planet designation Typhon. The coordinates point to a station inside the storm layer. Typhon, Valera whispered. The ghost world. No ships go there. The magnetic interference is lethal. Perfect place to hide a mind control hub, Ryan said. Jinx handed the chip back. Whatever you are doing, count me out. That is a suicide run. Ryan took the chip. He looked at Valera. We have a target, he said. Now we just need a ship that won't die in a magnetic storm. Valera smirked, the fire returning to her eyes. I know a smuggler who owes the crown a favor. Or rather, he owes the crown his head. I think he will be happy to lend us a ride. She pulled up her hood. Let's go take back my empire. Captain. Ryan followed her out into the neon glare. He watched her walk, head high, stride purposeful. She was back, but she was different. She wasn't walking alone anymore, and neither was he. The atmosphere of the gas giant Typhon was not merely a weather system, it was a cathedral of violence. The smuggler vessel, a patched-up freighter named the Rusty Kestrel, shuddered violently as it descended through the cloud layers. Outside the reinforced viewports, the universe had dissolved into a chaotic swirl of violet lightning and crushing pressure. Clouds of metallic vapor, crystallized by the immense gravity, drifted like glittering icebergs in a sea of purple bruise-colored gas. Ryan Hale fought the flight yoke, his knuckles white. The ship's structural integrity alarms were screaming a chorus of warnings that he did his best to ignore. Hold it steady, Valera commanded from the co-pilot seat. She was staring at the sensor array, her eyes narrowing as she tried to filter out the magnetic interference of the storm. I am trying, Ryan grunted, wrestling the ship as a downdraft hit them like a physical hammer. This bucket has the aerodynamic profile of a brick. If we go any deeper, the pressure will crush the hull. The coordinates are correct, Valera insisted, her fingers flying over the sensor controls. Dracul hit it well. The station is inside the eye of the storm, suspended in the magnetic dead zone. It is the only place in the sector where scans cannot penetrate. There, she said suddenly, pointing to a shadow in the violet gloom. Ryan looked up. Ahead of them, emerging from the churning clouds like a phantom, was a structure of terrifying scale. It was a black needle, miles long, pierced through the heart of a floating island of metallic crystal. It had no running lights, no beacons. It simply existed, a dark void against the lightning, the conspiracy hub. Ryan cut the engines to a drift, letting the storm's momentum carry them into the station's magnetic shadow. The turbulence vanished instantly, replaced by an eerie, humming silence. We are in. Ryan exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. Now comes the hard part. They docked at a service airlock near the station's ventilation array. The seal hissed, and they stepped into the belly of the enemy. The interior of the station was not like the golden, organic warmth of the Imperial Palace. This place was cold, clinical, and cruel. The walls were lined with throbbing cables that pulsed with a sickly green light. The air smelled of ozone and something copper-sharp, the smell of overcharged synapses. They moved silently. Ryan taking point with his pulse rifle, Valera behind him with a stolen energy blade. They encountered resistance at the lift clusters, enhanced guards wearing sleek, faceless helmets. Ryan took them down with ruthless efficiency, using the tight corridors to funnel their fire while Valera moved like a shadow, her blade cutting through armor and servos with sparks of white-hot energy. They didn't speak. They moved as a single unit, their breathing synced, their awareness of each other absolute. They reached the central chamber. The door was a massive blast shield. Rian hacked the control panel, his human tech skills bridging the gap with the alien interface. The doors groaned and slid open. Inside, they found the nightmare. The chamber was a vast amphitheater, dominated by the neural lattice engine. It was a monstrosity of biotechnology, a pulsating web of wet, glistening tissue stretched across a frame of silver metal. It looked like a brain flayed open and wired into the station's reactor. Hovering in the center of the web, suspended by cables that plugged directly into his spine, was High Minister Dracul. Around him, thousands of holographic screens displayed star systems, cities, and fleets. But the images were distorted. They showed burning cities that weren't burning. They showed fleets attacking that weren't there. Rian stared at the screens. He is not just spying. He realized horror dawning on him. He is broadcasting. "Welcome," Dracul's voice boomed, amplified by the room's acoustics. He didn't turn around. He didn't have to. The lattice allowed him to see everywhere at once. "I wondered when you would arrive, little Empress." Valera stepped into the light, her blade humming. "End this. Dracul, we know what you are doing. You are fabricating attacks. You are terrifying the galaxy so they will run into your arms. Effective, is it not?" Dracul spun slowly in the air to face them. His violet eyes were glowing with a manic intensity. "Order requires fear. Valera, you knew that once, but you became soft. You let your parents' memory rot your resolve." He gestured to the lattice. "This machine amplifies emotion. It takes a thought and projects it into the minds of billions. Right now, I am feeding them paranoia. By tomorrow, half the systems in the Dominion will be begging for martial law, and I will be the one to give it to them." "And where do I fit in?" Valera asked, her voice cold. "You?" Dracul smiled, a thin, cruel expression. "You are the villain, my dear. The mad Empress who burned her own stations, the chaos that necessitates the cure. I will execute you on a live broadcast, and the galaxy will cheer." "Not today," Rian said. He raised his rifle and fired. The bolt struck a shield shimmering around Dracul, dissipating harmlessly. Dracul laughed. "Kill the human," he commanded. From the shadows of the machinery, a dozen elite guards emerged. These were not standard soldiers. They were twisted, enhanced with cybernetics that made them twitch with unnatural speed. Rian shoved Valera toward the lattice. "Go! Get to the control interface. I will hold them off." Ryan dove behind a console as plasma fire erupted. He returned fire, dropping one guard, but they were fast. Too fast. He rolled, switching to his combat knife and pistol, engaging in a brutal close-quarters brawl. Valera sprinted toward Dracul. She leaped onto the central platform, her blade slashing at the cables connecting him to the machine. Dracul didn't use a weapon. He used his mind. He thrust a hand out, and a wave of psychic force slammed into Valera. It wasn't telekinesis. It was pure, distilled terror. Valera gasped, falling to her knees. Visions flooded her mind. Her parents choking on poison. Rian dead with a hole in his chest. Her empire burning. "Weak!" Dracul roared, his voice echoing inside her skull. "You are nothing but a frightened girl in a stolen crown." Valera screamed, fighting the visions. She channeled her anger, her rage at his betrayal. She pushed back with her own psionic will. "I am the Empress," she projected. "I am fire. I am wrath." The lattice hummed, glowing a violent, angry red. "Yes," Dracul taunted, "feed it your rage, Anger creates fear. Hate creates division. You are powering my engine. Valyra. Valyra realized her mistake too late. The machine didn't care about the flavor of the negative emotion, it only consumed the intensity. Her fury was only making the broadcast stronger. Across the galaxy, panic spiked. Rian, fighting 3 guards at once, felt the psychic backlash. A blinding headache dropped him to one knee. He saw a guard raise a vibroblade to finish him. He ducked under the swing, driving his knife up into the guard's armor gap. He kicked the body away and looked up at the platform. Valyra was losing. She was trapped in a feedback loop of rage and terror, her body convulsing as Dracul drained her will. She couldn't win with force. She couldn't win with anger. Rian scrambled up the platform, ignoring the plasma burns on his shoulder. He vaulted the railing and slid to Valyra's side. She was trembling, her eyes squeezed shut, tears leaking out. "Get away!" she gasped, lashing out blindly. "I will burn you." Rian didn't pull back. He holstered his weapon. He grabbed her hand. He didn't grab it gently. He gripped it with the rough, desperate strength of a soldier holding onto a lifeline. He intertwined his fingers with hers, skin against skin, pulse against pulse. "Valyra!" he shouted over the scream of the machine. "Stop fighting him. He is inside my head," she sobbed. "He is showing me everything I lost. Then show him what you found," Rian yelled. He squeezed her hand harder, grounding her. The contact was an anchor in the psychic storm. Through the translator implant, he pushed a single, clear signal into her mind. "I am here. You are not alone." "Don't give him the Empress," Rian said, his voice cutting through the noise. "He knows how to break the Empress. Give him Valyra. Give him the truth." "The truth is weak," she cried. "No," Rian said, looking into her terrified gold eyes. "The truth is the only thing he can't manipulate. What do you want, Valyra? Not for the Empire, for you. What do you want?" Valyra looked at him. She saw the blood on his face. She saw the way he looked at her, not as a goddess, but as a partner. She remembered the cramped pod. She remembered the cheap hotel room. She remembered the feeling of his heartbeat against her back. She dropped the shield. She dropped the sword. She stopped trying to be strong. She let herself feel the grief. She let herself feel the terrifying vulnerability of loving something that could die. She squeezed Ryan's hand back. "I want to be known," she thought. "I want to be free." She looked at Dracul, tears glowing on her cheeks, and she pushed. She didn't push anger. She pushed raw, unvarnished humanity. The neural lattice shrieked. It was designed to process fear, hate, and obedience. It was not designed to process the complex, messy, beautiful chaos of genuine empathy. The red light of the machine shattered, replaced by a blinding, pure gold. The broadcast shifted across the Dominion on 1,000 worlds. The visions of burning cities vanished. Instead, people saw a memory. They saw a little girl crying behind a throne. They saw a woman standing in a gravity storm, terrified but moving forward. They felt her exhaustion. They felt her regret for every life she had failed to save. And they felt a sudden, fierce warmth, the feeling of a hand holding hers in the dark. It wasn't a speech. It was a confession. Dracul screamed. "No!" he shrieked, clawing at his head. "Stop it! It burns!" The truth tore through his web of lies like a torch through cobwebs. He couldn't control the narrative because there was no narrative anymore, only raw experience. The backlash hit him. The millions of minds he had connected to didn't send back fear. They sent back confusion, sympathy, and sudden waking clarity. The feedback overload was catastrophic. The cables plugged into Dracul's spine sparked and exploded. He was thrown backward, crashing into the control console, his mind shattered by the weight of the very empathy he had tried to erase. The station began to shake. Critical failure. The automated voice announced, "Reactor containment breached. Lattice overload imminent." Rian pulled Valira to her feet. She was swaying, drained, but her eyes were clear. "It is done," she whispered. "Not unless we get out of here," Ryan said. "Run!" They sprinted back toward the exit. The station was tearing itself apart. Gravity plates failed, turning the floor into a roller coaster. Debris rained down from the ceiling. They reached the main corridor leading to the airlock. The floor ahead of them buckled, opening a fissure into the plasma venting shafts below. "Jump!" Rian commanded. They leaped. A secondary explosion blew out the wall to their right. The shockwave hit Rian in midair, knocking him off his trajectory. He slammed into Valira, his momentum carrying them both toward the far wall. He scrambled for a grip, his boots finding traction on a piece of twisted piping. He caught himself, but Valira was slipping past him, dazed by the blast. Ryan reached out. He didn't grab her arm. He didn't grab her shoulder. His hands clamped firmly, undeniably, onto her hips, arresting her fall and pulling her back against him. He hauled her upright, steadying her against the bulkhead while the corridor collapsed behind them. They were pressed together, breathless, dust and sparks swirling around them. Valira blinked, looking down at his hands, which were still securely holding her steady. She looked up at him. A laugh bubbled up in her throat, hysterical, relieved, and entirely inappropriate. "You touched my butt, human," she gasped, shouting over the roar of the destruction. Rian froze, about to apologize and about to pull away. But Valira didn't step back. She leaned into him, her eyes bright with tears and adrenaline and the sheer high of being alive, locked onto his. Her voice dropped, trembling but laced with a sudden fierce heat. "Do it again," she whispered, "if you dare." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. It was a challenge. And for the first time, it was a promise. Rian stared at her, dirt-streaked and beautiful, and grinned. "Move." "Empress," he said, keeping one hand on her lower back to guide her. "Or we will be dead before I get the chance." They scrambled into the airlock of the rusty Kestrel seconds before the docking clamp sheared off. Rian punched the launch sequence, and the ship shot away from the station. Behind them, the conspiracy hub died. The neural lattice went critical. A sphere of golden light expanded from the center of the storm, vaporizing the station, the metal clouds, and the lies. It was a new star, born and dying in the same moment. Rian watched the shockwave on the rear monitor. He let out a long breath, slumping back in the pilot's seat. He turned to look at Valira. She was sitting in the co-pilot chair, watching him. She wasn't looking at the explosion, and she was looking at him. She unbuckled her harness. She stood up, her legs unsteady, and walked over to him. Rian unbuckled and stood to meet her. The adrenaline crash was hitting them both, leaving them shaking, their nerves raw. But beneath the exhaustion, the connection they had forged in the lattice was still humming, a live wire between them. Valira reached out and placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart. Rian placed his hands on her waist, drawing her in. They stood there for a long time, just breathing. The silence of the ship was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was full of the things they had said without words. "We broke it," Rian whispered. "Yes," Valira replied, her voice soft. "We broke the machine. And I think we broke the rules too." She looked up at his lips. They were millimeters away. She could feel his desire through the fading link of the implant. It wasn't the hungry, selfish desire of a conqueror. It was the warm, patient desire of a man who waits for permission. Rian didn't close the gap. He waited. He let her decide. Valera leaned in, brushing her nose against his. Not yet, she whispered against his mouth. Ryan pulled back an inch, surprised but respecting the line. Not yet. Not like this, she said, resting her forehead against his chin. Not while we are shaking. Not while we are reacting to the fear of death. She looked up at him, her golden eyes clear and serious. When I kiss you, re-inhale. It will not be because I survived a battle. It will be because I want to. I want it to be a choice. A calm, deliberate choice. Rian smiled. He slid his hands up her back, pulling her into a fierce, crushing hug. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of ozone and life. I can wait, he murmured into her ear. I have nowhere else to be. Valera closed her eyes, wrapping her arms around his neck. They swayed slightly in the artificial gravity of the old ship, holding each other up as they set a course for home. The galaxy outside was in chaos. The political storm was just beginning, and they were two fugitives in a stolen freighter. But as Valera held him, she knew one thing for certain. The walls were gone, and for the first time in her life, she didn't want to build them back up. The great hall of the Thalzen Palace had been built to intimidate for 3,000 years. Its obsidian floors had reflected the faces of petitioners terrified for their lives, and its golden arches had echoed with sentences of death. But today, the hall was different. The shadows had been banished by banks of high-intensity floodlights, and the air hummed not with fear, but with the electric buzz of a galaxy holding its breath. Empress Valera stood on the central dais. She was not wearing her war armor. She wore a robe of simple white weave, unadorned by jewels or badges of rank. It was a statement. She was not hiding behind the carapace of the state. She was standing exposed. To her right, standing at a respectful distance but clearly part of the royal entourage, was Captain Rian Hale. He wore a dress uniform that was a hybrid of Earth military crispness and Thalzen fluid aesthetics. He stood at parade rest, his face impassive, but his eyes scanning the crowd with the vigilance of a hawk. In the center of the room, kneeling within a suppression field, was High Minister Dracul. He looked small, stripped of his flowing robes, his cybernetic enhancements disabled. He was just an old, bitter man with hate in his eyes. Behind him knelt 12 other conspirators, generals, ministers, and guildmasters who had traded their loyalty for a promise of power. Valera raised her hand. The murmuring of the 5,000 assembled courtiers died instantly. The silence was absolute. We are not here for an execution. Valera's voice rang out, amplified by the hall's acoustics. We are here for clarity. She gestured to the air above Dracul. Activate the lattice logs. The air shimmered. The recovered data from the Typhon station did not appear as text or grainy video. It appeared as a three-dimensional immersive projection, powered by the same neural technology Dracul had tried to weaponize. The hall was suddenly filled with ghosts. Huge, translucent figures replayed the conspiracy's secret meetings. The court watched as Dracul ordered the sabotage of the peace talks. They heard his voice, cold and amused, discussing how to maximize civilian casualties to incite panic. They felt, because the lattice projected a faint echo of the emotional intent, his utter contempt for the lives he governed. Then, the scene shifted. It showed Valera, not the polished Empress on the coins, but the woman in the mud of the escape tunnels. It showed her fear. It showed her failures. It showed the moment she admitted she did not know how to rule without terror. The court gasped. To show a monarch's weakness was unheard of. It was political suicide. Valera let the projection play until the end, until the image of her holding Ryan's hand in the storm faded into light. She stepped forward, the white robe glowing in the harsh lights. "You have seen the crimes of these men," she said, gesturing to the prisoners. "They sought to rule you through fear. They believed that you were cattle, easily herded by panic." She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces, Thalzen, human, Cygnus, and a dozen others. "But you have also seen my crimes. I ruled you through distance. I let myself become a statue because I was too afraid to be a person. I let men like Dracul flourish because I thought ruthlessness was strength. I was wrong." She took a breath, and Rian saw her hands tremble slightly before she clenched them into fists. "The Dominion cannot survive as a cage. It must become a home. Therefore, I am dissolving the absolute monarchy." Chaos erupted. Shouts of disbelief, denial, and shock tore through the room. Valera did not flinch. She waited, standing like a lighthouse in a hurricane, until the noise subsided into a stunned silence. "From this day forward, the Thalzen Dominion will be governed by a high council of shared rule. Every species under our protection will have a seat. Every world will have a voice. I will remain as Empress, not to rule over you, but to serve as the protector of this new covenant." She turned her head, her golden eyes finding Rian. "And to ensure we never forget the perspective of those we once considered beneath us, I am appointing Captain Ryan Hale as the First Lord Advisor to the throne. He will speak for humanity, and for all those who have been silenced by our arrogance." The eyes of the court shifted to Ryan. There was hostility there. Yes, but there was also curiosity. And in the back of the room, among the younger courtiers and the foreign delegates, there was the sparking of something dangerous and new. Hope. Dracul, still kneeling, let out a raspy, broken laugh. "You are a fool, child," he spat. "You are handing the keys of the kingdom to the wolves. They will tear you apart." Valera looked down at him. There was no anger in her face anymore, only pity. "Let them try," she said softly. "I am not fighting alone anymore." The weeks that followed were a blur of bureaucratic warfare. Dismantling an empire of fear was harder than blowing up a space station. There were treaties to rewrite, governors to fire, and 1,000 years of protocol to burn. Rian Hale stood on the landing pad of the Royal Spire, watching the shuttle descend. It was a United Earth Federation diplomatic craft, sleek and gray, bearing the blue insignia of his homeworld. He adjusted the collar of his uniform. His bags were packed, sitting by his feet. Valera stood next to him. She was wearing her council robes, deep blue and silver, less armored than before, but still regal. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, staring at the descending ship. "They will give you a medal," she said. Her voice was neutral, carefully stripped of emotion. "You are the man who stopped a galactic war. You are the hero who tamed the Thalzen Empress. Earth will give you a parade. You can retire to a nice house on the coast. No more gravity storms. No more assassins." Rian looked at her. He saw the tension in her jaw. He heard the silent plea she refused to speak. "It sounds peaceful," Rian said. "It does." Valera agreed. "You deserve peace. Rian, you have spent your life fighting." The shuttle touched down, its engines whining to a halt. The ramp lowered, and a Federation delegation stepped out, flanked by honor guards. They looked crisp, efficient, and sterile. Admiral Vance was leading them. He spotted Ryan and waved, a beaming smile on his face. "Captain Hale!" Vance shouted. "Majestic work. Son, you are coming home." Rian looked at the Admiral. He looked at the gray uniforms, the standard-issue sidearms, the rigid posture of the soldiers. It was everything he had known for 30 years. It was familiar. It was safe. He looked back at Valera. She was watching the soldiers with a guarded expression. She looked isolated again, the weight of the reforms pressing down on her shoulders. Without him, she would face the sharks alone. She would survive, of course. She was Valera, but she would turn back into stone. Rian looked at his hands. He remembered the feeling of the neural lattice, the raw, terrifying connection he had shared with her. He remembered the cheap hotel room on the trade moon. He remembered the way she laughed when he tripped her in the training ring. Earth was where he was born, but it wasn't where he was alive. On Earth, he was a weapon, a tool to be stored in a locker until the next war. Here he was a scandal, a problem, a partner. He picked up his bag. Valera flinched, a microscopic movement of her eyes. She thought he was leaving. Rian walked toward the Admiral. He stopped 5 feet away and saluted. "Admiral," Ryan said. "Captain," Vance said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Get your gear on board. The President is waiting to shake your hand. We have a debriefing scheduled in Sector 4. "I am afraid I will miss the debriefing, sir," Rian said. Vance blinked. "Excuse me?" Rian reached into his jacket and pulled out a data slate, his commission resignation. He handed it to the Admiral. "I am resigning my commission, effective immediately," Rian said. "I have accepted a permanent post as the diplomatic liaison to the Dominion." Vance stared at the slate, then at Ryan. "Son, have you lost your mind? You are turning down a hero's welcome to stay here, with them. They are monsters." Rian looked back at Valera. She was frozen, her eyes wide, the mask of the Empress slipping to reveal the stunned woman beneath. "They are not monsters, sir," Rian said, his voice quiet and firm. "They are just people who forgot how to trust. And I have a lot of work to do." He stepped back and saluted again. "Safe travels, Admiral." He turned around and walked back to Valera. He didn't look back as the Admiral sputtered and the shuttle ramp hissed. Valera watched him come. She didn't move until he was standing right in front of her. "You are a fool," she whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. "You could have had peace." "I don't want peace," Ryan said, dropping his bag on the deck. "I want you." Valera let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She grabbed the lapels of his uniform and pulled him onto the balcony, away from the prying eyes of the landing crew, into the shadow of a pillar. "Are you sure?" she asked, her golden eyes searching his face, frantic and vulnerable. "Ryan, if you stay, there is no going back. You will be the human who betrayed his species. You will be the scandal of the century. They will whisper about us. They will hate us. Let them whisper," Rian said. He reached up and cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was warm, the bioluminescence in her cheeks glowing a soft, joyous pink. "I spent my whole life following orders. Valera, I was a good soldier. I was a good weapon. But I was never a person. You made me a person." He brushed his thumb over her cheekbone. "I am staying. I am staying for the reforms. I am staying for the council. But mostly, I am staying because I cannot imagine waking up in a universe where you are not within reach." Valera stared at him, the last of her defenses crumbling into dust. "Then don't be out of reach." She breathed. She pulled him down. The kiss was not tentative. It was an impact. It was the collision of two stars that had been circling each other for an eternity. Valera kissed him with a fierce, possessive hunger, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer as if she could merge their atoms. Rian wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground. He felt the tension leave her body. the rigid posture of the Empress melting into the softness of the woman. It was a surrender, but it was also a victory. It was the physical confirmation of the promise they had made in the lattice. They stood there on the balcony, hidden in the shadows, clinging to each other while the wind from the landing pad whipped their clothes. It was sensual, electric, and deeply, achingly human. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, Valera rested her forehead against his. "You are going to be a terrible advisor," she murmured, smiling against his lips. "You never listen to protocol, and you are going to be a nightmare to work for," Rian countered, grinning. "But I suppose I am stuck with you now." "Forever," she promised. The transition was not smooth. The galaxy did not change overnight. The news of the Empress's relationship with her human advisor broke the interstellar internet. It was a scandal of epic proportions. Tabloids ran holographic spreads of them walking together in the palace gardens. Pundits argued that Valera had been brainwashed by human pheromones. Nobles whispered behind their fans about the degradation of the royal bloodline. Valera heard the whispers, and she ignored them, or rather, she confronted them. 1 month after the trial, during a grand ball to welcome the new multi-species council, a haughty duke from the outer systems made a snide comment loud enough for the court to hear. "It is quaint," the duke sneered, swirling his wine. "The Empress keeps a pet human. I suppose it is fashionable to have exotic animals these days." The room went silent. Rian, standing by the refreshments, stiffened. Valera didn't shout. She didn't call the guards. She simply walked across the room, her arm looped through Ryan's. She stopped in front of the Duke. "A pet, my lord?" Valera asked, her voice pleasant and sharp as a razor. The Duke paled. I merely meant, Captain Hale is not a pet," Valera announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "He is the man who saved my life when my own kin tried to end it. He is the man who taught me that strength without heart is just brutality." She looked at Ryan, her eyes softening. "And if trusting someone different from myself makes me fashionable, then I suggest you all update your wardrobes, because this is the future of the Dominion." She turned to Ryan. "Shall we dance, Lord Advisor?" Ryan bowed. "It would be my honor, Your Majesty." They danced in the center of the room, a human and a Thalzin, moving in a rhythm that defied tradition, and slowly, hesitantly, other couples joined them. A Cygnus delegate asked a Thalzin minister to dance. A human officer bowed to an alien noble. The ice began to crack, but their partnership was not just about dancing. It was about work. Rian spearheaded the Unity Initiative. He took the terrifying technology of the neural lattice, the weapon Dracul had used to broadcast fear, and repurposed it. "We can't just destroy the tech," Rian argued during a strategy session. "It is too part of the infrastructure. We have to change the signal." Working with Thalzen scientists and human engineers, they recalibrated the emitters. Instead of broadcasting visions or override commands, the lattice was tuned to broadcast. Empathy. It started small. In conflict zones, they pulsed low-frequency waves of calm. In diplomatic summits, they used the tech to allow delegates to literally feel each other's hesitation and hope. It wasn't mind control. It was translation. It bridged the emotional gap that language couldn't cross. Rian and Valera traveled constantly. They visited the mining colonies where humans had been slaves, and Valera knelt in the dirt to ask for forgiveness. They visited the glittering spires of the core worlds, and Ryan stood tall to demand respect for the outer systems. They were tired. They were stressed. They argued about tax codes and fleet deployments until 3 in the morning. but they were happy. 1 year later, the private sector of the palace contained a room that did not exist on any official map. It was the Empress's personal sanctuary, a gravity garden. It was a spherical chamber where the laws of physics were suggestions, not rules. Islands of moss and flowering vines floated in the air. Waterfalls cascaded in loops, flowing from nowhere to nowhere. Petals of bioluminescent light drifted like lazy snowflakes, glowing in soft hues of violet and gold. Rian drifted near the center of the room, lying on his back in the air, watching a school of neon fish swim past his nose. He was wearing loose training clothes, barefoot and relaxed. Valera was meditating on a floating rock a few meters away. She looked serene, her silver hair floating around her like a halo. Peaceful, isn't it? She asked without opening her eyes. It is, Rian said. I still think the fish are judging me, though. Valera opened one eye. They are royal fish. Rian, they judge everyone. She uncurled her legs and pushed off the rock, gliding through the zero gravity with the grace of a mermaid. She drifted toward him, spinning slowly. Do you regret it? She asked suddenly. Rian turned his head. Regret what? Staying. The Admiral sent another message today. They are unveiling a statue of you in New York. You could be there, waving to the crowds. Ryan laughed. I hate statues. The pigeons ruin them. He rotated his body, planting his feet on a passing drift of moss to launch himself toward her. He moved with confidence now. He had mastered the Thalzin art of zero-G movement. He drifted behind her as she floated upright, looking at the artificial stars on the ceiling. Besides, Ryan said, his voice dropping to a low murmur, if I were a statue, I couldn't do this. He reached out. With deliberate, playful slowness, he placed his hands on her hips. He let them rest there for a second, feeling the warmth of her through the silk of her tunic. Then, he gave a gentle squeeze, a grounding, possessive, teasing touch. Valera gasped. She stiffened, but not with fear. She spun around in the air, her face flushed, her eyes sparkling with mock indignation. You touched my butt, human, she exclaimed, trying to sound scandalous and failing miserably as a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Rian grinned, floating just out of arm's reach. I did, he admitted. It was a tactical maneuver. I was checking for structural integrity. Structural integrity, she scoffed, launching herself at him. I am the Empress of the Dominion. My structural integrity is flawless. She tackled him in midair. They tumbled together through the cloud of drifting petals, limbs tangling, laughter echoing in the chamber. It was a mirror of their first meeting. But where there had been fear, now there was only joy. Where there had been gravity pulling them down, now they were flying. Valera pinned him against a soft wall of moss, hovering over him. Her hair created a silver curtain around their faces. She looked down at him, her amusement fading into a look of fierce, overwhelming adoration. She leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. You are insolent, Captain, she whispered. You are reckless. You are impossible. Rian smiled, bringing his hands up to rest on her waist again. I know. Valera pulled back slightly, her golden eyes burning with heat. Do it again, she whispered. Rian raised an eyebrow. The butt touch? Valera laughed, a sound that was bright and free. Everything, she said, with the touching and the staying. The believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. She leaned back against him, closing the distance until there was no space left between them. Do it again. She breathed against his lips. And this time, don't you dare stop. Rian didn't stop. He pulled her in, kissing her amidst the floating waterfalls in the starlight. They drifted together in the center of the garden, two specks of life in the vastness of the universe, holding on to each other. They had crossed the lines drawn by fear. They had broken the rules of their worlds. And in the wreckage of the old empire, they had built something that no army could conquer and no time could erode. They had built a home,